Before we begin this incredible Norse tale, please hit that like button. If you enjoy stories of courage and divine intervention, subscribe to our channel for more Viking mythology adventures and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your support helps us bring these ancient stories to life. The harsh winds of the approaching winter howled through the valleys of Nordmark, carrying with them the scent of snow and the promise of months filled with darkness. In a modest wooden dwelling nestled between towering pine trees, a scene of profound sorrow was unfolding. Ingrid, a woman whose once golden hair now lay matted against her fevered brow, struggled to draw each breath as her life slowly ebbed away. Beside her humble bed sat her two daughters, their faces etched with worry and grief. Solveig, the elder at 17 winters, possessed her mother's fair complexion and gentle blue eyes. Her steady hands held a damp cloth, which she used to cool her mother's burning forehead. Beside her, 15-year-old Astrid fidgeted nervously, her auburn hair catching the flickering light of the hearth fire. Both young women had inherited their mother's beauty and strength, but neither possessed the knowledge or experience needed to survive the brutal winter that approached. Outside, the sound of approaching footsteps crunched through the fallen leaves. Ingrid's eyes, though dimmed by illness, brightened slightly as she recognized the familiar gate. The wooden door creaked open, and a tall figure stepped into the warm interior of the home. Thorvald, a warrior of considerable reputation throughout the region, removed his woolen cloak and approached the bedside with respectful quiet. His presence filled the small room with an aura of protection and strength. Standing well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders earned through years of training and labor, Thorvald had served as the family's closest friend since the passing of Ingrid's husband 3 winters prior. His dark beard was neatly braided, and his deep-set brown eyes reflected both wisdom and compassion. Despite his formidable appearance, he moved with surprising gentleness as he knelt beside the dying woman. "Thorvald," Ingrid whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling of the fire. "You came." "Of course, dear friend," he replied softly, taking her cold hand in his warm, calloused ones. "I received word of your condition and came as quickly as I could manage." Ingrid's eyes moved between her daughters and the warrior, and she gathered what little strength remained within her failing body. "I have a request that weighs heavily upon my heart," she began, pausing to catch her breath. "The winter approaches, and it promises to be the harshest we have seen in many years. My daughters, they are good girls, kind and hard-working, but they have never faced such trials alone." Solveig squeezed her mother's other hand gently. "Mother, please, do not worry about us. We will manage somehow." But Ingrid shook her head weakly, her maternal instincts overriding her daughter's brave words. "Thorvald," she continued, her gaze fixing upon the warrior with desperate intensity, "you have been like a brother to our family since my husband's passing. I am dying, and I cannot bear the thought of leaving my daughters to face the coming months without protection." The warrior's expression grew solemn as he understood the weight of what she was asking. Throughout the region, winter claimed many lives each year. Food became scarce. Raiders sometimes ventured down from the northern territories in search of supplies, and the bitter cold could take even the strongest individuals if they were unprepared. 2 young women alone would face challenges that could prove insurmountable. "What would you have me do?" Thorvald asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Protect them," Ingrid pleaded, her voice gaining strength from desperation. "Promise me that you will keep them safe through this winter. Stay with them. Help them prepare for the harsh months ahead and ensure they live to see the spring flowers bloom again. I know it is much to ask, but I have no one else to turn to." Thorvald looked at the 2 young women, seeing in their faces the same determination and strength that had made their mother such a respected member of their community. Solveig met his gaze directly, her chin raised with pride despite the tears that threatened to fall. Astrid, though younger and more frightened, stood tall beside her sister, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The weight of the responsibility settled upon Thorvald's shoulders like a heavy cloak, but he did not hesitate in his response. "Ingrid, you have my word as a warrior and as your friend. I will protect Solveig and Astrid through this winter. They will see the spring, and they will be safe. This I swear by my honor and by the gods who watch over us." A look of profound relief washed over Ingrid's features, and for the first time in days, she managed a genuine smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now I can find peace." As the night wore on, Thorvald remained by the bedside, sharing stories of better times and offering what comfort he could. The daughters took turns resting, knowing that their vigil would soon come to an end. When dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ingrid drew her final breath, surrounded by those who loved her most. The funeral preparations began immediately, for winter waited for no one's grief. Following the ancient traditions of their people, Thorvald helped the sisters prepare their mother's body for the journey to the afterlife. They dressed her in her finest clothing, placed her most precious belongings beside her, and built a proper funeral pyre on the hill overlooking their home. As the flames consumed the wooden structure, carrying Ingrid's spirit to join her ancestors, Thorvald stood between the two young women, his strong presence offering them stability in their moment of deepest sorrow. The smoke rose high into the clear autumn sky, visible for miles around, announcing to all who saw it that a good woman had passed from this world. "What happens now?" Astrid asked quietly as the fire began to die down. Thorvald placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Now we prepare for winter," he said with quiet determination. "Your mother asked me to keep you safe, and that is exactly what we shall do." The days that followed were filled with intense activity as the small household prepared for the challenges ahead. Thorvald proved to be not only a skilled warrior, but also a knowledgeable provider. He taught the sisters how to preserve meat properly, showed them which roots and herbs could sustain them through the lean months, and helped them gather sufficient firewood to last until spring. Under his guidance, they reinforced their home against the coming storms, sealing gaps in the walls and ensuring the roof could withstand heavy snow. He showed them how to set traps for small game and how to ice fish in the nearby stream. Most importantly, he shared his knowledge of survival tactics that could mean the difference between life and death in the harsh northern winter. As the first snows began to fall, transforming the landscape into a world of white and silver, the three had established a routine that made their small home feel secure and warm. Thorvald slept on a simple bed near the hearth, ready to protect the sisters from any danger that might arise. During the long, dark evenings, he would tell them stories of distant lands and great heroes, keeping their spirits high despite the grief that still weighed upon their hearts. But even as they settled into their winter routine, none of them could have predicted the extraordinary events that would soon test not only Thorvald's promise to their dying mother, but also his faith in the ancient gods who ruled over their harsh northern world. The winter that descended upon Nordmark proved to be more brutal than anyone had anticipated. Snow fell continuously for weeks, piling so high against their dwelling that Thorvald had to dig tunnels just to reach their supply shed. The wind howled like tortured spirits, rattling the wooden walls and making sleep difficult, even for those accustomed to harsh weather. Despite their careful preparations, food began running low as the weeks stretched into months. The small game that Thorvald had been catching became increasingly scarce, and ice fishing yielded meager results. The preserved meat they had stored was lasting longer than expected, but even with careful rationing, it was clear that supplies would not last until spring's arrival. One particularly harsh night, as the three huddled around their dwindling fire, Astrid fell ill with a fever that left her weak and shivering, despite the warm furs wrapped around her small frame. Solveig did her best to care for her younger sister, preparing healing teas from their remaining herbs and keeping constant watch through the dark hours. Thorvald, meanwhile, ventured out into the dangerous storm conditions, desperately searching for any additional food sources that might help sustain them. Days passed, and Astrid's condition worsened rather than improved. Her fever spiked dangerously high, and she began speaking deliriously about seeing their deceased mother calling to her from beyond. Solveig, exhausted from days of caring for her sister while battling her own hunger and cold, finally broke down in tears of desperation. "Thorvald," she sobbed, as he returned from another fruitless hunting expedition, snow covering his beard and cloak. "I fear we are losing her. The fever grows stronger, and I do not know what more I can do." The warrior knelt beside Astrid's bed, placing his large hand gently on her burning forehead. The young woman's breathing was shallow and labored, and her usual rosy complexion had turned an alarming shade of pale. He had seen such symptoms before during his travels, and he knew that without proper medicine and nourishment, the girl's chances of survival were diminishing with each passing hour. Standing slowly, Thorvald made a decision that would change all their lives forever. "There is one option we have not yet considered," he said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was about to attempt. Solveig looked up at him with confused eyes. "What do you mean?" "I will appeal to the gods," Thorvald replied, moving toward his traveling pack and retrieving a small carved wooden idol. The figurine depicted Freyr, the Norse god of fertility, prosperity, and fair weather. In the old stories, Freyr has been known to show mercy to those who demonstrate true devotion and sacrifice. Without another word, Thorvald donned his heaviest cloak and ventured out into the raging storm. He made his way to a small clearing in the forest where ancient stones had been arranged in a circle by generations past. This sacred space had long been used by the local people for important rituals and communication with the divine realm. Kneeling in the deep snow, Thorvald raised the wooden idol toward the storm-darkened sky and began to speak in the ancient tongue of his ancestors. "Mighty Freyr, bringer of prosperity and lord of the growing season, hear the plea of your faithful servant. 2 innocent maidens suffer in this harsh winter, and 1 grows near death. I have sworn to protect them, to keep them safe until spring's return." The wind seemed to intensify around him as he continued his prayer, but Thorvald pressed on, his voice growing stronger despite the bitter cold that numbed his face and hands. "I offer myself in service to you, great Freyr. Grant us the miracle of spring's early arrival. Bring warmth and growing things to sustain these worthy daughters, and I will give you whatever payment you deem appropriate." For several moments, nothing happened except the continued howling of the winter storm. Then gradually, Thorvald became aware that the snowflakes around him were beginning to change. Instead of the sharp, icy crystals that had been falling for weeks, larger, softer flakes began drifting down from the dark clouds above. As he watched in amazement, these unusual snowflakes began to transform upon touching the ground. Where they landed, small green shoots pushed up through the white covering, followed quickly by delicate flower buds that opened into beautiful spring blossoms. The transformation spread outward from where Thorvald knelt, creating an ever-widening circle of miraculous spring growth in the midst of the harsh winter landscape. The warrior rose to his feet, hardly daring to believe what he was witnessing. The bitter wind was softening, carrying with it the sweet scent of fresh flowers instead of the sharp bite of winter air. Everywhere he looked, the snow was melting away to reveal rich, fertile soil from which sprouted vegetables, fruits, and healing herbs in impossible abundance. Rushing back to the dwelling, Thorvald found that the miraculous change had reached there as well. The walls of their home were now surrounded by thriving gardens filled with fresh food and medicinal plants. Inside, the temperature had warmed considerably, and Astrid was sitting up in bed, her fever completely broken and her cheeks returning to their healthy color. "Thorvald," Solveig exclaimed as he entered, her face glowing with joy and amazement. "Look what has happened. Astrid is well again and outside. It is like spring has arrived months early." For several weeks the 3 lived in this miraculous early spring, gathering the abundant food and enjoying the warm weather that had replaced the brutal winter. Astrid grew stronger each day, and both sisters marveled at the divine intervention that had saved their lives. Thorvald, however, found himself watching the horizon with growing concern, knowing that such divine gifts rarely came without a price. His concerns proved justified when, on a particularly beautiful morning filled with birdsong and the scent of blooming flowers, a figure appeared in their garden. Tall and radiant, with golden hair that seemed to capture and reflect the sunlight, the visitor was unmistakably divine in nature. This was Freyr himself, come to collect payment for his miraculous intervention. "Greetings, faithful Thorvald," the god spoke, his voice carrying the warmth of summer winds and the promise of harvest time. "I have answered your prayer and granted the miracle you requested. The maidens live, the spring has come early, and abundance surrounds them." Thorvald knelt respectfully before the divine presence. "Great Freyr, your mercy has saved 3 lives, and I am eternally grateful." "Indeed," Freyr replied with a knowing smile, "but now comes the time for payment. In exchange for my gift of life and abundance, I require a bride from among these sisters. One of them must come with me to serve in my divine realm." The words hit Thorvald like a physical blow. He had expected some form of payment, but this demand struck at the very heart of his promise to protect both daughters. After everything they had endured, after their mother's dying plea and his sacred oath, how could he allow either sister to be taken away? Before either Solveig or Astrid could respond to the god's demand, Thorvald rose to his feet and stepped forward. "Great Freyr, I offered myself in service to you when I made my prayer. Take me instead of either sister, my life for theirs. Let this be the payment you require." The god studied the warrior with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of countless seasons. "You would sacrifice yourself for these maidens? Give up your mortal life and all its possibilities?" "Without hesitation," Thorvald replied firmly. "I gave my word to their dying mother that I would protect them. If my life can purchase their freedom and safety, then I offer it gladly." Freyr nodded slowly, an expression of respect crossing his divine features. "Your devotion and honor are rare qualities, warrior. Very well, I accept your offer, but not in the way you might expect." With a gesture from the god, Thorvald felt a strange transformation beginning in his body. His feet seemed to be taking root in the rich soil of the garden, and his arms began to stretch upward toward the sky. But rather than feeling fear or pain, he experienced a deep sense of peace and purpose. "You shall become an eternal guardian," Freyr explained as the transformation continued. "A tree that will provide fruit and shelter for these sisters and their descendants for generations to come. You will watch over them always, protecting them through every season of their lives." As bark began to cover his skin and branches sprouted from his fingertips, Thorvald felt his consciousness expanding rather than diminishing. He could sense every part of the garden around him, could feel the life force flowing through every plant and flower that surrounded their home. Most importantly, he maintained his awareness and his ability to influence the world around him in ways that would keep the sisters safe. The transformation completed, Thorvald stood as a magnificent fruit tree at the center of their garden, his branches heavy with apples, pears, and other sustaining fruits that would ripen in every season. His presence blessed the land around him, ensuring that crops would always grow abundantly and that the sisters would never want for food or shelter. Solveig and Astrid, who had watched the transformation with tears streaming down their faces, approached their protector's new form with reverence and gratitude. They could sense his consciousness within the tree, could feel his continued love and protection surrounding them like an invisible shield. "Thank you, dear friend," Solveig whispered, placing her hand on the rough bark of his trunk. "You have given us everything." Years passed in the blessed valley where Thorvald's sacrifice had transformed the land. Solveig and Astrid grew into wise and accomplished women, eventually marrying good men from neighboring settlements and raising families of their own beneath the protective branches of their guardian tree. The miraculous garden continued to provide abundance through every season, and tales of the warrior who became a tree spread throughout the northern lands. Children and grandchildren played beneath Thorvald's branches, always finding ripe fruit when they were hungry and cool shade when the sun grew too warm. In times of trouble or danger, the tree seemed to respond, its branches swaying in warning winds or its roots shifting to create barriers against threats. The story became legend, passed down through generations as a testament to the power of sacrifice, honor, and divine mercy. Visitors would travel great distances to see the miraculous tree and to hear the tale of how a warrior's promise to a dying mother led to eternal protection for all who sought shelter in its shadow. And in the rustling of leaves and the generous offering of fruit, those who listened carefully could still hear the echo of Thorvald's voice, forever keeping his sacred promise to protect those he loved.